the first thing I should mention is, before we start to talk to Giuseppe, is that we've actually got a bottle of Prosecco to give away for the best question in the first half of the tasting. So we usually taste 2 wines and then have a couple of minutes break to allow everyone to top up on water and any nibbles or whatever they need to top up on. And so best question in the first half of the tasting, we'll have a bottle of Giuseppe's lovely Prosecco. So without further ado, Giuseppe, welcome. Lovely to have you remotely in Dublin. How are you?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm very well, thank you.
You've had a busy autumn, because obviously with the harvest and the winemaking at this time of year, it's very intense at the winery, isn't it?
Yes, it has been a very long harvest and a winemaking season, and it has been quite normal in terms of peaking time, starting at the end of August. But we were busy, and we are still busy because we have been already crushing the grapes of Amarones. So some vats are fermenting now. So we have been working non-stop since beginning of September.
Okay.
So we are looking forward also to the Christmas holidays and period.
Can imagine. When did you pick the Amarone grapes?
This was picked from the 11th of September until the 3rd of October, something like this, with some
and they're
breaks.
dry. They're dry already. They're able to be.
Yeah.
Crushed now.
Yeah.
Okay.
The appellation suggested that we could crush the grapes from November 13th.
Okay.
And so we did around a week, 10 days later, because there is a minimum time for drying the grapes that it's given by the appellation organization.
Okay. So, and just for people that don't know, the Amarone grapes are dried in lofts and shriveled, which concentrates the flavor, concentrates the sugars, and makes for the very intense wine at the end of the day that's Amarone. So happy with the grape quality on the Amarone this year anyway.
Yes. Yeah, but it's with I must say that we have seen through the years that with the global warming and the improvement also of viticulture, the drying process period is got shorter and shorter, because before it was until January, sometimes February, often December, and now it's beginning of November. So really things are changing.
Quite early. Is that because the humidity was lower this year, or?
No, it's because in fact we had a very dry September. So the first phase of the drying process of the grapes was very, very fast.
Okay, interesting. Okay, well, I'm sure everybody wants to crack on with the Lugana. So number 1 is the Lugana. This is a reasonably new wine for you, Giuseppe. Is this the 3rd vintage or the 2nd vintage?
I think it's the 3rd vintage.
3rd vintage,
and,
okay.
Yes. It's,
and I know that we put our hands up before the wine was even in bottle. I remember you asking if we would be interested, and the grapes were still on the vines, and I knew that we could do a good job with this in Ireland. So I know that we're one of the biggest customers for this wine. So tell us about the Lugana.
Well, yes, you're not only one of the most, faithful customers, but one of the first as well. So we have been putting faith in our Lugana from the very beginning, and that's for us a very rewarding. But the Lugana, yes, in fact, is a wine that is produced on the southern part of Lake Garda. So it's an appellation that is divided in between Lombardy and Veneto, so on the 2 regions. And it's very interesting soil, because it's quite clay soil, deep, and this give quite strong depth and character to this wine that is produced mostly with the grape variety called Turbiana, which is the dialect name for Trebbiano. Okay. And so this wine, it's a wine that has a quite I will say a stronger character, that it's for example very different from the minerality of the Soave, or very different also from the more crispy note of the Custoza, which are other white wines of the region. But it has been since always a wine that is very well matched with freshwater fish. which is quite typical here on Lake Garda. Trout, perkfish, and some other fishes that I don't know the name in English, but Lake Garda is quite rich in fish.
And people that would visit the region would definitely recognize this wine. They would see Lugana in the menus in restaurants and so on, wouldn't they? It would be a fairly a wine that locally would be enjoyed.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely, because is the closest white wine region to Lake Garda, so it's spread all over the coast, especially the eastern coast of Lake Garda, which is the one where we are based.
Okay, and I mean, we've got a tasting note in the booklet, and we talk in and obviously we talk to you guys about the tastings and how the wines should taste, and it talks about stone fruit and kind of blossom character of the wine. I mean, it definitely does have the sort of peachy notes, and it's quite floral. It's white blossom, but then there's a slightly, maybe an underlying toastiness to the wine, do you think?
Yes, this is, I will say, something that comes from the soil, because there is this maybe a note that remind a little bit fumé, a little bit the nuts, and it's also the clay, and that's quite a good combination with the white flowers, with the flowery note that you have, and gives a very special character to Lugana, because I would say that Lugana is a white wine with a strong personality among the wines in the region.
And also quite mineral, and then a sort of slight acidity that you get, the slight salivation in the sides of the tongue. It's got delicious fresh acidity, which keeps it very fresh on the finish.
Yes, it's a fresh wine, has a nice freshness without being too acidic. So is of course very good paired with food, but you can also have a glass without food, and you'll have a savory mouth without having an aggressive freshness or acidity in the wine.
So in terms of the food pairing, the suggestion from the winery was warm rosemary focaccia, dipping olive oil with smoked salmon, walnuts, and pickled cherry tomatoes. I'd be interested to know whether anyone, you can pop it in the chat in terms of whether anyone went with that food matching suggestion, or if there were any other suggestions for the wine this evening. It would be good to hear them, and whether they worked or not, because it's always a question of personal taste. But I mean, just tasting Lugana tonight, I think we've gone with smoked salmon because we were coming up with some Christmassy suggestions. But I mean, I can imagine this would be delicious with pizza, with pasta, even with shellfish. It's just so fresh, and I think that acidity would be very good, with the smoked salmon, cuts through the oiliness of the salmon. So the smoked salmon is excellent with it. Good. That's good. Well, someone's gone with the smoked salmon, hopefully Irish smoked salmon. Good. And in terms of if you were having something more elaborate on Christmas Day with Lugana, Giuseppe, what would you do with this? Are you there a supper before Christmas with friends, or on Christmas Day, you were wanting to do something a bit more elaborate? What would you do with this wine?
Well, first of all, I'm very envious because we don't have salmon here, and it's really one delicacy, and I think is a great match. We also have sometimes salmon. Well, we have to say to begin with that in Italy, or at least in our region, and also in the family, we don't have really a traditional dish that in some countries you have very traditional Christmas dish. So, for example, we have more fish in our family. But going back to the question, I think that we have, for example, perkfish and the pink trout fished on the lake that are prepared with some capers, olive oil, and beside with some white polenta as a starter, nice. And that's a typical match. And another one, it's risotto with tinca. Tinca, I don't know how to translate, is a fish that lives a little bit in the mud, so has a very earthy note, a little bit reminding of spinaches, and that's also a very classical pairing with a local dish.
Well, that sounds nice. The risotto sounds rich and tasty, so that sounds gorgeous. Okay, so we'll move on to the reds, I think, Giuseppe, but we'll pour the Bardolino, and maybe you can give a bit of history of the estate, because it's got a very, very long history, doesn't it?
Yes, in fact, Bardolino,
the Bardolino's got a black label now, and apologies, we've put it with the older burgundy coloured label in the leaflet, but this is the Bardolino that we're pouring.
Yes, Bardolino is the name of the village and also of the appellation. And but the Bardolino, it's an estate that was belonging to the Guerrieri family, which is the family of my grandmother, and they were making wine since centuries in the area, and has been always very well known, this area, for rosé wine as well as light reds. So we are in two villages called Bardolino and Cavaillon. The family goes back to the, I think, 1300, and then was from one family to the next. But viticulture has been always part of the multi agriculture that was in the area. And I think Bardolino is a great wine, a little bit uncomplicated, because it doesn't have such a big tannic structure. Has nice fruity character, has a little bit of spices, because the Corvina has this peppery, spiced note. And also, if you look at the color, it's not so deep in color. So it's really, I will say, ubiquitary. I don't know if this is the term that you can use in English. Red wine that can go with some poultry, with also some fish, can be drank in the spring or in the summer, slightly fresh. So Bardolino is really uncomplicated wine, and of course, being not barrel aged, you have all the freshness and the character of the Corvina grapes.
Okay, so basically no oak at all in this wine. And is it Corvina and Rondinella? Are the
Yes,
grapes? Is that right?
it's Corvina and Rondinella, and then there is a slash of Sangiovese and of Merlot, but it's at least 2/3 Corvina. So really,
Okay.
Corvina is dominant in the wine.
And what's the personality? You've mentioned the personality of the Corvina, but what's the personality of Rondinella? What does that grape bring to the blend?
Well, the Rondinella is a good question, because it's like always the B grape variety in the area, because Corvina and Corvinone are the most important and diffused. Rondinella has this violet note, this flowery note, very delicate, has very little freshness, so it doesn't bring much freshness, but it brings a lot of elegance and finesse to the blend, while the Corvina has a little bit more tannin, has a little bit more color, and a little bit more freshness. So
Okay.
Rondinella, it's also light in color, and I will say that brings some flowery note to the blend.
Okay. And don't forget that there is a bottle of Prosecco, people, for the best question, before we finish the first two wines. So it's there for the grabbing at the moment, because we haven't had any questions. Oh, here we go. We've got a question, Giuseppe. So which of the two reds go better with the traditional Christmas dinner? So I'm going to assume turkey for the traditional Christmas dinner. And the question is, which of the two reds is the better match for turkey, Giuseppe?
Well, I don't know the traditional Irish Christmas dinner, so I don't know how the turkey is prepared, because of course is a white meat, but it can be very rich, or I don't know how it's prepared, because I would say that in general maybe the Bardolino could go very well, but it of course depends on the sauce, what is together with the turkey, because turkey is kind of a little bit neutral meat, is not so strong in taste. So maybe the Bardolino will respect more the personality of the meat, of the turkey meat.
Mm. Well, the reason that we put a lighter red in the Bardolino and then a richer red is because some people have turkey obviously on Christmas Day, but goose is obviously an option. Some people have roast beef. So And I think with the lighter Bardolino probably does go well with turkey, but it's got the freshness that can cope with the gravy. And someone's asking, is it possible to visit the... So I think we should probably, before we move on, I asked about whether the Corvina and the Rondinella were in pergolas, which are the tall vineyard structures that the grapes hang down and almost you can walk underneath them because they're quite high. You said they're in Gio, so those are closer to the ground and go along the wires. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, we can simplify the explanation of differences on saying that simple Guyot, the grapes are cultivated is a kind of an edge where the grapes are hanging and all the leaves are on top. And then the grapes are getting usually the rows are planted north to south, so they get the sun from the morning to the evening.
Okay.
And it's a vertical way of cultivating the vines, while the pergola, the vine goes up and then it's horizontal. So the grapes, as you were saying before, are hanging. And this form of cultivating the vines, it's now a little bit back because it protects more the vines, the grapes from sunburn and from hail as well. So it's the traditional way of cultivating the grapes in the region. But I will say that the Guyot system, for several different reasons, is a more qualitative way of cultivating the wines.
Okay.
It gives
I
more
should have
quality.
said, Giuseppe, that, I mean, it's your family estate, but you look after the vineyard, the farming of the grapes, and you look after the winemaking, don't you? That's your area that you're looking,
Yes.
that's your passion, is
Yeah,
the
yeah.
grapes and the
Then
making the wine.
like many family wineries, there are many different things to do all year round. But mostly I spend my time, let's say, taking care of the vineyards and the cellar. So my passion is really into the viticulture and winemaking.
So someone's asking if they can visit the winery, which I know that they can. So maybe you could explain a bit about your tourism facilities at the winery, because you have apartments and then you have the winery visits and lunches and tastings, and there's quite a lot going on, isn't there, in terms of being able to visit as a guest at the winery?
Yes, definitely, because it's a very touristic region here, Lake Garda, the eastern part of Lake Garda. And at the winery, we are organized with, I would say, between March and October, we have ongoing tours. We have some tours that are for free, and then on the website are all the information about timetable and so on. And then we have more structured wine tours and tasting that can be booked online and reserved, as well as tasting accompanied by some light lunch, light meal. And at the same time, in the center of the town of Bardolino, which is right on the lake, in the old cellar, we have been restoring the old cellar, and we have apartments, facilities there. And then connected to this, we have also the historical garden in Valpolicella in Negrar, close to Verona. So we really have, I would say, a lot to offer to the visitors, especially during spring and summer. On the other hand, if someone wants to have more attention at the winery, if you come in the cold months of the year, there is less people, and at the winery there is always more time to dedicate to our guests for tasting. And
I see someone's visited. Someone said that they visited the winery last August, and they said that they had a fabulous afternoon with you last August. And yeah, I've been there as well, and it's just fabulous facilities in terms of the apartments are beautiful, the restaurant's beautiful, the tasting. It's worth a visit if you're in that area, very much so. It's really lovely. So someone is asking, Jerry's asking about how sustainability has been built into production process. But the new winery is carbon neutral, isn't it?
Yeah, that's carbon neutral, yes, because we have a solar panel, we have a dwell, and we are basically, from a point of view of the energetic, we are more or less, we are I say independent. We are producing more energy than what we consume. So we sell a bit of energy to the state company. And then we have our own water. We recycle the water as well that we use from the dwell. We are considering also recuperating the rain water. But for example, this year we had really a lot of rain, so we don't have a lack of water. And then in the vineyards, we are in a process to moving toward sustainability certification that will take another couple of years, but this is the direction where we are going. And then we have been we are not using fertilizer derivate from petrol. We are mostly using organic fertilizer. Then also we are slowly moving away from the use of herbicides. Then with spraying of the spraying of the vines, we usually copper and sulfur. I think this. I think that the word is in English. So we are really trying to go in direction, but will be labeled probably in 2 or 3 years. And at the same time, I always think that there is a good common sense that one can practice in the vineyards, and that's more than any label, or it's just experience, and try to treat gently the nature of the vines. And the first operation is to ask the vines not to produce too many grapes. Then you don't need to add too much. You don't need to to really work the vineyards in a very persistent way.
Really keeping the vines in balance so that they don't overproduce.
Yes, they don't overproduce. And then yes, we are really careful. And I think from the pruning, if you have a good balance in the vineyards, then there is not much work then needed to be done. But nowadays also we are challenged by new challenge, like for example the global warming. So we need to not taking off too many leaves during the summer because we need to keep the grapes protected from the sunburn. We have irrigation only on emergency irrigation on majority of the states. So there also we have to be careful with the use of water. But what we are, for example, doing more than trying to use the irrigation is to work the soil. So we stimulate the roots of the vines to go deeper with the mechanical work of the soil. So there are a lot of small tasks that can be adjusted to face the climate change, the global warming, which is the biggest challenge for us in the vineyards.
Thank you, Giuseppe. There's a question here about whether you make Recioto del Valpolicella.
Why or if we?
Do you?
No, we don't. No, we only produce
make Recioto di Soave, don't you?
Recioto di Soave, yes.
Yeah, which we do stock when we can get some. David, we can't always get it, but we do get a small allocation of the Recioto di Soave. But Giuseppe doesn't make a Recioto di Valpolicella. Sorry, Giuseppe, why don't you make a Recioto di Valpolicella?
Traditionally, we have been always producing the Amarone, and maybe because we have the estate in Soave, we have been thinking that with one sweet wine we are in the portfolio. We are pleased, and yes, and traditionally maybe because the family has been always more focused on producing the Amarone.
Okay. That's a good preoccupation, I think. Good use of the grapes. Yes. We had the food match with the Bardolino was antipasto of buffalo mozzarella, thyme-infused Sicilian olives, Parma ham, and fresh figs. So we would love to hear how people got on with that food match, or if anyone else had anything different that they did with wine. We'd love to hear that. And Giuseppe, what would you serve with the Bardolino if you were maybe doing a supper in December, or you were looking for something warming in January to do with the Bardolino?
Well, definitely, for example, what is a vegetarian soup, also with some cereals, not like minestrone with the pieces of vegetable, but really like a a creamy vegetable soup.
Nice.
It's a good pair, especially in the cold months of the year. In the region, we have a pumpkin soup, for example, a pumpkin soup that is served with some seeds on top of it, and that's quite rich and substantial, and can be a good pairing with the Barolino. And then that's more for the warm months of the year. It's also a good pairing with mascarpone and burrata, this type of cheese. And yes, then it's also used with chicken or rabbit, white meat, not necessarily with the sauce, but it's a good match. And we have coniglio in umido, which is a rabbit done in a little bit like it's difficult to explain, but anyway, it's cooked with white wine and olives and tomato sauce, and that's
nice. So there's a few nice extra suggestions to go with the Bardolino, that sounds delicious. So we're going to stop for a couple of minutes and we'll come back at 1943. Just let people get the chance to top up on water or any extra nibbles. So that's 1940. We'll come back at 1943. We'll just stop the video. Oh, there's a couple of more questions, Giuseppe, before we move on to the Cloreretti. Someone asking what's your best red and your best white. That's like asking who your favorite children are.
Yes, I mean I can answer and say which one is the most rewarded and prized red wine, which is the Amarone. So the Amarone Calcarole and Amarone Villa Rizzardi, they are both Amarone Riserva, and these are the most prestigious wine of the winery. And in terms of white wine, I will say that maybe Ferra, which is a Soave Classico, it's the most important white wine, is also the only white wine that is shortly barrel aged and has a longer potential of life in the bottle. So
wines that you can keep and enjoy in a few years as well as just now, sort of thing. Okay. Yes. And then there's a question here. What would you suggest to have with pheasant or game? Or sorry, pheasant or venison or wild game?
I would say that if we divide the wild game or the venison into the one that are very strong in taste and the one that are more lighter in taste, because in my experience, for example, pheasant is like maybe partridge. It's they have a meat that it's delicate, is not too strong, and so it's are more easy to be matched with the red wine. That in that case could be why not the Cloreretti, or the Poiega, the Valpolicella Ripasso, or even the Munus could be a good pair. Okay. But if we take like a wild boar or deer or type of meat that are more tasty and strong in flavor, as well as, for example, the duck and the goose, they will probably be better matched with an Amarone.
Okay. In my opinion. So, well, what we've got with the
Cloreretti.
The Cloreretti is I'm just going to read it out. The match is festive roast goose and sage roasted parsnips, or festive seasonal vegetables, goulash and roasted chestnuts. So we've gone with chatting to you guys, we've gone with a vegetarian option, and we've also gone with the roast goose option. And I was going to decant this, so I brought a decanter, actually, the Cloreretti, the 19. I wouldn't expect really any sediment in this, Giuseppe. Would you?
No, because
No.
all our wines, they have a very light filtration, but
Okay.
we
So we
don't.
don't need to worry about sediment. It depends obviously on different wines, but I've just brought a simple decanter and I just felt myself that it would be nice to decant the Cloraretti. So I'm just going to decant some here and let some air at the wine. Not going to do the whole lot, just have a smell. Oh gosh, it smells delicious. It's quite it's like dried fruits, hints of herbs, spices. How would you describe your 19 Cloraretti?
It's a very it's a warm vintage, so it's a wine quite with a strong personality. There is the earthy character that comes. Well, I'm having the 2020 here in the glass, so I have to do it by memory. But it's you have the clay soil character that it's coming out, that it's
Roundness.
from the area,
Yeah.
and then of course you have the mature note of red berries, but we are not going too far into like the plum notes that are typical of very mature or over mature Merlot. So we try to pick the grapes at the right point of maturation to keep nice freshness, drinkability, and not to overdo the wine. And then typically there is also a kind of blueberry note that comes out in time. Now I don't have it under the nose, but I know by experience that I can smell it I can find it in the 16, in the 17, and probably it will also come out, if not already now, in the 2019. And I think it while being decanted, the wine will benefit minute after minute, or to express more complexity.
There's a slightly balsamic note to the 19 as well.
Yeah.
Quite intense and rich, and the slightly balsamic, sort of sweet, savoury note to it, both on the nose and on the palate. If anyone else has any other aromas or flavours that they're picking up in the wine, we'd love to hear about them, because as we know with wine, there's no right and no wrong. It's very much a personal thing. And people would always identify different things depending on what they, what they recognise, or so any thoughts on the wine? I mean, this is a serious glass of red wine for the winter, really, in terms of it's a perfect wine for this time of year. And if you were having, I think it is quite rich for Turkey, but as we said, we've suggested goose, but also even things like pheasant and venison, it would be delicious with it, and also can easily take you through to some, a nice cheese platter. But yeah, it's really delicious. I know you're saying you've got the 20 there, Giuseppe. We've got the 19, and it's absolutely gorgeous. In terms of the winning bottle of Prosecco, it's going to go to Jerry, who asked the question about sustainability into the production process at Rizzardi. So thank you for that question, Jerry. The O'Brien's team, I don't quite know how this happens. This is a magic of Zoom that I don't understand, but someone in the O'Brien's team can contact you. We'll do a direct message with you and get your details so that we can get that bottle of Prosecco out to you. So thanks very much for that question. We appreciate it. So Giuseppe, what would a typical, what would be the main dish of the day on Christmas with you and the family? What would you guys have in Italy if you were, let's say you've got the bottle of Cloraretti, what would you serve with it in Italy if it was?
Well, the day of Christmas, we have homemade meat tortellini in a soup, so with the broth to start with, and then typically we have bolliti misti at the family, which is a quite a traditional dish of the region. That's a boiled meat, and usually you have you have now I don't know how to translate, but it's cotechino. It's something that it's kind of sausage of pork meat is boiled. Then we have the chicken. Then we have some ham, and then we can have different cuts of beef boiled. They are all boiled together, and then we take them out and we cut in slices, and they go together with salsa verde, which is a sauce made with
Nice.
parsley, egg, olive oil, capers, a little bit of garlic, and then another sauce that is pera, which is made with with some bread, with some pepper, and with some the bone part, the inside part of the bone of the ossobuco.
Okay.
And so these are two sauces that goes with bollito misti, and is quite a rich Christmas dish.
It
Yes,
sounds rich, but the salsa verde kind of offsets, making it a bit fresher, and it sounds delicious.
it's not very vegetarian or vegan.
Not very vegetarian. It sounds quite complicated to make it in the kitchen.
No, not really,
Oh,
because
really?
and then you can boil it for I think for some hours, and then you reheat, because being boiled meat, there is not really there is a minimum cooking point, but you can't overcook it somehow,
Okay.
you know.
Okay. So just a sort of tasty, as you say, not very vegetarian, but someone's asking here, Tom is asking what food complements Amarone best?
Well, I think that in general, the goose and the duck, in my opinion, are a very good
Okay.
pairing, because there is always in this type of meat, they are a little bit very firm meat, but with a bit of fat and a little bit of wild, sweetish taste that is married to the Amarone. And then we have some sweet curry based dish as well, because of the sweetness of the curry. So not hot, but like a green curry or yellow curry based dish. Then typically we have beef stroganoff. We have the also some hard paste cow milk cheese, not too strong in flavor, like an old Grana Padano or an old Parmigiano or an old Pecorino or Monte Veronese in our region. But I know that you have some delicious cheese in Ireland as well. I don't know the names, but I imagine you have also some cheese that can go very well with Amarone.
Mm.
And
Okay.
if the Amarone is a bit older, you can have it also with some chocolate, bitter chocolate based dessert,
yes.
you know, because
Dark
it's
chocolate.
dark chocolate, yes.
Yeah. And sometimes, in Verona, when you go out for dinner, you quite often have an Amarone risotto. What do you think of that with Amarone?
I personally think that having risotto alla Amarone together with Amarone, it can be a bit too much. It's Amarone
Okay.
in the dish and Amarone, but that's the risotto with Amarone typically has just a touch of Amarone. So
Okay.
but in my opinion, risotto alla Amarone is better paired to a Valpolicella Superiore Ripasso, or even a Valpolicella Classico, because it's a little bit fresh, and the risotto alla Amarone, it's creamy also, so it needs something that is a little bit not so strong as Amarone, in my opinion.
Okay. So the Cloraretti, before we take some more questions, the Cloraretti is obviously Merlot. It's a single vineyard, which is Clos, meaning the single vineyard. Can you just give a bit of background as to why you have a single vineyard of premium premium Merlot grapes in the Cloraretti?
Yes, I mean, first of all, we call it Clos because it's a vineyard surrounded by walls. So partly are walls done with stones, and partly are vertical stones to sign the border of the estate, because we are in an area where we have a very old tradition of producing stones, marble, and in the old time they were collecting all the stones from the vineyard to create the walls around the vineyard, and that's from there is coming the name Clos, and then Rovareti is the dialect name of the place of Rovereto, and this is a single vineyard Merlot that has been planted in 1999, and we started this project because we had a deep clay soil which was not very adapted to the local grape varieties. So this is how we have been a little bit asking ourselves what we could grow in this a piece of land in order to have an interesting wine, a good result, and according to some studies on the climate, on the soil, we came finally to the idea of plant some Merlot and to start this project. So the first vintage was 2006, and the idea is to produce a Merlot that it's linked with the place. So there is the international or the typical aroma of Merlot connected or linked to the soil where it's cultivated. And we are very careful not to overdo with this wine, because Merlot is a grape variety that is quite rich. And if it is overdone, it can be too jammy, too sweetish, too rich, too warm. And this is what we try to avoid with this wine. And the wine is barrel aged for 12 months in small oak barrels.
And Giuseppe, did you plant this vineyard after you had spent some time in Bordeaux? Did you fall in love with Merlot in Bordeaux, or was this planted before you went to Bordeaux?
No, it was planted because I came back on the estate in 1998. And then we had this piece of land, and I remember the old vineyard manager, he was telling me that before they took off the previous vineyard, the grapes that were there produced, they were always used to produce rosé, because they were never too mature, not too concentrated to produce red wine. So to have a piece of vineyard in Valpolicella to produce rosé is a little bit silly, I think. Yeah. And therefore and then according to my experience, but also we get some external advice to help us to choose the right grape variety. And yes, and that's
and you must be very happy with the results.
We are very happy and very pleased. It's unusual to have a premium Merlot from the Valpolicella area, but we decided to take the challenge, and now it started giving us some nice good feedback and satisfaction.
No, it's delicious, and really it's not often that you see 100% Merlot, so it's very nice to get the opportunity to try such a silky, smooth 100% Merlot. Okay, so the people are we've got quite a few questions about dessert and your wines, Giuseppe. So I think what we've done this evening, or we tried to do this evening, is that we tried to suggest the Prosecco to match the a panettone. And the panettone, we've suggested that we have panettone with marinated berries such as raspberries and strawberries and so on, is one suggestion. The other thing that I do with panettone, and Giuseppe, you may not know what this is actually, but there's this really old-fashioned kind of Scottish and Irish pudding, which is called a bread and butter pudding. And it's when you get bread and you butter it, stale bread, and you butter it, and then you put raisins in, and you put egg and cream, and you put it in the oven and you cook it, and it makes this kind of luxurious pudding, which is a really old-fashioned thing, but I actually quite often make it with panettone. So that's another suggestion with panettone. And we are suggesting Giuseppe's Prosecco with desserts. Not, there's other options, obviously, but often Prosecco served as an aperitif, but we quite like the idea of serving it at the end of the meal. And the nice thing about serving bubbles at the end of the meal is that it freshens the palate, doesn't it? After a rich say, Christmas lunch, it's nice to have a few bubbles that just liven the palate up. Do you reckon, Giuseppe?
Yes, yes. I've seen a question about Amarone. Shall we answer now or later on?
Oh no, you go on, go on ahead and answer. I'll open this Prosecco.
I think was MG Ryan, if I'm not wrong, that asked about the Calcarole 2011. And what is the food pairing? And I think that 2011 was bottled in 2015, so has been in the bottle for 8 years. So it starts to be not mature, but starts to be an adult as an Amarone, and it's war vintage is a very good vintage, and I think that is at that point is a wine that goes very well with cheese or with the duck. It depends, you know, on the personal taste, because it's a quite mature wine, so it starts to be a little bit evoluted with some complexity that are very well pairing with the cheese. I generally never suggest to decant Amarone, because I think Amarone is produced with the grape variety, mostly Corvina and Corvinone, that it's weak versus the contact with air. So my personal taste is never to decant an Amarone, maybe to open it a little bit before. It will breathe through the neck of the bottle. But especially if an Amarone is old, decanting could immediately ruin the wine. So it's a very when we were talking about decanting, I'm thinking that is not something that can be applied to Amarone.
No.
Definitely to the Merlot, but not to the Amarone.
Okay. And sometimes with Amarone, it's so complex that it's referred to quite frequently as a meditation wine, isn't it? That really, it's maybe not even to go with food sometimes. Maybe an old Amarone like the 2011, maybe the thing to do is just to enjoy it on its own. And because as you smell and taste something that old, every smell, every sip brings something different. It's layers of complexity that almost open up over the course of the evening or over the course of the wine being in the glass. And maybe the thing to do with the 2011 is just to sip it and enjoy it and contemplate the wine.
Yes, yes, why not? I mean, it's very important to pour it a little bit fresh, because I think temperature is a key factor. Also to use a glass that is adapted. And for example, for Amarone, I like very much either white wine glasses or the Syrah type of glasses. Definitely not the red Bordeaux typical glasses, because the Amarone will be I know by experience, tasting different shape of glasses. It's yeah, this is out of my experience the Syrah shaped glass, but temperature is very important. And definitely, as you said, Lynne, also if you drink it by itself, then you get all the different nuances that an old wine has.
I'm going to open the Prosecco.
You were saying, yes, something interesting going back to the Prosecco, that, well,
Twisting the bottle, not the cork.
Sorry?
I'm twisting the bottle, obviously,
yes.
the cork.
Yes.
Trying to do it elegantly. Let's hope we can pull it off.
And it's very
nice.
Interesting, the dessert that you were mentioning before. I never tasted. I look forward, maybe next time I come to Ireland.
I need to make it for you one time when you're over in Dublin.
That's with pleasure. And then you were saying that yes, at the end of a meal, after the reds and probably some savory food, the Prosecco is kind of putting your mouth back in balance somehow, to have something refreshing and fruity. And one of the, I think, unique positive characteristic of Prosecco compared to other sparklings is that it's very smooth. So it never has a very strong acidity. It's not very mineral. It's more on the fruity side. It's very gentle. A sparkling wine is not too demanding and is not intimidating wine. So it's really an easy wine. Sometimes It's also used in our region for making cocktails, because starting from this Bellini cocktail, which is made with a peach puree or other type of cocktails, because is respecting also the other liquors, so is very well used. But I think at the end of a meal, and with the panettone, is a classical pairing of the prosecco. Our prosecco is a non-vintage, is extra dry, and has always very strong this a white apple, white fruits, a delicate character. And so it's with the texture of the panettone, it goes very well, because texture of panettone has some butter in it. It's not very buttery, but there's a creamy, rich texture. And then panettone has the dry fruit, the raisins. It can have some nuts. Then in Italy we have so many different variante of panettone, but the classical one has dried fruit and raisins, and then it can be matched with the sauce, the panettone, or enjoy by itself. And yes, and so is a classical pairing of our region, the panettone and the prosecco. And actually, in the next days, with some friends I've been invited, they are organizing a group of friends one evening, when they bring, everyone has a different brand of panettone, and then they do a blind tasting of panettone, and they typically do it the first weekend of December. This is also very interesting.
That's fun, actually.
Yes,
that's actually quite fun. A blind panettone tasting.
Because you have the more industrial ones and the more artisanal ones, and they are very different way of interpreting the panettone recipe. And originally panettone is from Milan.
Oh, right, interesting. I suppose you've got a lot of panettone left at the end of that, so you can make some bread and butter pudding with panettone at the end.
Yes, yes, yes.
They're so big that you always, I don't know, I always find that you tend to have some left over. So there's a question about wine and dark chocolate, but I think we answered that. We were saying the Cloraretti with the dark chocolate is a nice combination. But even things like if you want to have a red wine, the Cloraretti would be nice with, say, a rich chocolate mousse. Would you go with that, Giuseppe?
Yes, even though I for the Cloraretti, I mean, I'm more for a main course more than something sweet. Maybe an old Amarone will feel better the task.
Interesting, with a bit of sweetness left.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
But I'm always talking about bitter chocolate, not really milk chocolate.
Yeah.
So something really bitter.
So high 80 plus or something cocoa type chocolate.
Yes.
Okay. What's the difference? There's another question. Sorry, I'm going to ask about Christmas pudding. So the question here is, we were wondering what you would match with Christmas pudding. Are you familiar with Christmas pudding, Giuseppe? Typical plum pudding?
Oh, not really.
No, okay. So
Sorry.
it's basically it's a very rich kind of almost like a sponge stroke dumpling with loads of raisins. It can have nuts in it, and it goes into a bag, and it's kind of steam stroke boiled. And it's traditional to celebrate with a brandy butter or with sometimes custard or cream. And it's basically, I suppose it's like a warm, very rich fruit cake, but then there would be brandy and thing goes into it as well. So quite concentrated, quite rich. Not that sweet, but kind of sweet. So maybe your Recioto di Soave would be good with it.
Yes, because Recioto di Soave it's a sweet wine, but it's not over sweet, and it's always balanced by a very nice freshness, and also I will say drinkability. So it's not too dense and not too rich. So it can be paired with a dessert, as you mentioned, and then in our region it goes very well with meringue-based dessert, also orange-based dessert. So that's typical in the region. And
That's
then
nice.
we have the lemon meringue as well, and
Okay,
and
nice.
and the sponge cake. We have kind of sponge cake which is typical of the
Uh-huh.
region, that goes also with.
And then I think, you know, maybe the Prosecco would go with Christmas pudding because it would be light and fresh versus the richness of the pudding. But I like the idea of, you've just mentioned lemon meringue, and I actually think that would be really nice with the Prosecco as well. You know, it's because again, you've got the freshness of the bubbles, the touch of acidity. And so maybe you could tell us, because there's a very, very fine bead in this Prosecco.
Yes.
Quite an elegant, fine bead. And I mean, different Prosecco is not made in the bottle, is it? It's made it's made in tanks and then
Yes.
transferred into bottle. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, yes, is the Sharma method of spumantizzazione, as we say, yes. And I will say that it's non-vintage, and it's usually a bottle within the year after the harvest, so it's very freshly bottled. And sometimes Prosecco can be a little bit too diluted in general. Unfortunately, there are some very good Prosecco on the market, some medium Prosecco, and also some less interesting Prosecco. So because it's not such a strong personality, great variety, it's everything on nuances, and always the white fruits, the apple, a little bit the peaches, a little bit maybe the apricot, some elderflower, flowery aromas are important to be found in the Prosecco. And then it's quite a generous grape variety, the Glera, because the vines produce quite a bit of grapes. So it's not something. It's I will define it as an uncomplicated wine. That's really has a little bit of everything, but it's never a wine that is intimidating. And I like the idea of having with the dessert as well, because too often we associate sparkling wine to aperitif or starter, but in fact it's very good match also for different type of desserts.
But I suppose if you wanted to keep things simple, if you were having a few people round at Christmas for dinner, or you were having, you know, say on Christmas Day, and you wanted to do the Prosecco with a dessert, but you could also serve the Prosecco, as you say, as an aperitif at the start, because it's light, it's fresh, it's floral. Bubbles always puts everyone in a good mood. And you know, it's versatile enough that you could do that. You could serve at the beginning and then serve at the end. And as you say, there's lots of more straightforward Proseccos in the, you know, but this has got lovely aromas, it's got floral character, it's got white pear, as you say, it's got an apple-y character. So, and then it's fresh as well. It's not too sweet, because some Proseccos are very sweet, and this is a nice, refreshing style, which this is, I mean, this is our top selling Prosecco, basically, Giuseppe.
Okay, that's nice.
Yeah.
Nice, it's good to hear.
Customers
But
love this wine.
we
And
try to be also not too austere in the style of the wine, to have a good balance, because it's easy to have to play on the sweetness, but then I think you lose elegance, you lose drinkability. So it's not our style, and it's really, we try to have a good balance between the freshness and the fruity character, and the natural sweetness of the grapes without having a sweet character.
Okay, we have another question then. What is the difference between the Calcaroli and the Villa Amarone and the Three Cru Amarone? There's a definite Giuseppe Rizzardi fan here, listing all the Amarones.
Yes, that's we don't have the wines on the table and in the glass, so we can't talk about the differences while tasting the wines. But basically, the main difference are the provenance of the grapes. So Calcarole, it's a single vineyard wine. The vineyards are on terraces. Calcare in Italian means limestone, so it's limestone soil. It's a hill planted, and the vines are on terraces facing south west, so they get really from midday and the afternoon sun. Is a very warm micro climate and region, and the soil combined with the exposure of the wines gives a very strong personality to the wine that typically need a couple of years in the bottle before starting to show the personality of the wine. Villa Rizzardi is a different soil because it's clay soil, and the pergola, the vines are cultivated with a pergola system, and the clay soil give more an immediate approachability of the wine. Has quite a strong structure, and it's ready earlier in the bottle usually. It's a bit more muscular, and it's ready to drink earlier than the Calcarole. Then on the long term, the both wines, they evolve in a different way. The Tre Cru is a blend of one part of Poyega, one part of Calcarole and Roveretti, and they are a little bit younger vines, and it's more an immediate Amarone. And the Tre Cru is produced on a good vintage, are produced the Tri Amarone. On a less lucky vintage, I will say, we are not producing the Calcarole of the Villa Rizzardi, and in that case, all the production is goes into Tre Cru. So from top to the bottom in terms of quality, complexity, and richness, we have Calcarole, Villa Rizzardi, and Tre Cru. So I hope I've answered to the question. But to give you an example, 2018, we only have produced the Tre Cru.
Okay, thank you, Giuseppe. So listen, we're nearly at the end of the evening. Thank you, Giuseppe, for joining us. We've talked about some traditional Christmas food, but we've also come up with some new and interesting things this evening that we just given some different suggestions, which is great. It's just always good to come up with something different for Christmas as well as doing the traditional. So thank you for giving us the insight into what you do in Italy and also what your family have. So we've got a few minutes for any questions and and hopefully we'll be able to answer them. Someone's saying, thank you for the wee box of chocolates, a lovely surprise. Okay, thank you for that. Love the way you're having your Prosecco in a big wine glass, Lynne. Is this the way we should serve it? Well, it's actually a champagne glass. And this would be the style of glass that's now quite fashionable for sparkling wine. I think there's been a couple of fashions for sparkling wine. One is like a saucer, if you want to call it that, an old-fashioned kind of baby sham style glass, and then a flute. But the flute, unless it's tapered, a flute tends to be, it doesn't allow you to capture the aromas in the glass. So this style is what you would really see now as fairly, the considered current trend, I guess you would say, for sparkling wine. So I guess it is quite big actually, but it's very tapered here at the bottom. So there's not a huge amount in the glass, I'd like to point out. Giuseppe, how would you serve Prosecco? What style of glass would you serve Prosecco in?
I would say that I tend to use white wine glasses.
Okay.
But then at home, for example, we have some old glasses of the previous generation, and typically they were flute. They were flute, or also like quite not very tall, large, and like a little bit like cups. No, I don't know how to say in English, but glasses that are quite large and not very tall. So
goblets, maybe.
Sorry?
Goblets.
Yes, maybe. But I think that in the past the flute was the most diffused glass for drinking sparkling, and I think in the past was more for the aesthetic. Nowadays, where we are a little bit more careful also on the technical side of the tasting, definitely glasses like the one you are using and showing, they are the best to really bring out and put in best condition the wine to perform, to express the aromatic palette. Yeah.
I think the important thing is that you have the shape where it goes in at the top, and you've got the aromas and you can smell the wine. And also we would encourage people to enjoy sparkling wine with food, and treat it more as a wine than necessarily just a celebration drink. So that, I suppose, this more of a wine glass shape is definitely what we would be talking about these days when it comes to, you know, Prosecco, Champagne, Cava, etc. We would be thinking about how could you match that wine with food, because in the end, that's the best way to enjoy the wine and the best way to enjoy the food if it's matched, if they're matched nicely together, and, you know, experiment with the flavors and see what works and what doesn't work. Giuseppe here. Thanks, Giuseppe, for the tips. Really, Amarone. We love your winery and we'll be back next year, hopefully. So that's a date for 2024. And then another question here. Have you any suggestions on where to stay when visiting the vineyard? Oh, yes, your apartments, Giuseppe. What's the name of the apartments?
Yes, we have the apartments now on the lake.
What's the name? What's the website for the apartments, Giuseppe?
Is Rambaldi Apartments.
Yeah, rambaldiapartments.it, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, Rambaldi Apartments.
If you put on research motor the name Rambaldi Apartments, then it comes out.
But they're basically, the apartments are in Bardolino, and there's all sizes of them. They're self-catering, and they're absolutely beautiful. So there you go. We're plugging the apartments, Giuseppe.
Yeah, but I will say that on Lake Garda, really, there are all sort of
campsites,
different pockets, accommodation, starting from the campsites, and then nice hotels or flats on the lake. And then if it is very high season, I always recommend, I mean, you can stay on the lake if you really like to be in the bars and where it's very lively. Other ways to go inland, few kilometers inland. First of all, is you can save some euros in the high season of the summer, and then maybe it's a bit quieter. And if one likes to hike or to go around with a bicycle and so on, and not to be in too much into the car traffic, I will definitely say that July, the second part of July and the first part of August, the lake is very, very busy. So it depends on a personal choice and taste. But really, we offer on the lake all sort of possibilities.
Yeah. Okay, David and Mary, thank you for that question. So unless we have any other questions, I think, Giuseppe, it just remains for me to say thank you very much for joining us. And thank you everyone for joining the online tasting. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope that you've enjoyed the wines. And we appreciate you joining Giuseppe and I this evening. And everyone have a lovely Christmas. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Lynne. It was for me also a pleasure to share this evening with you all, and very happy and proud to see that our wines are well spread out all over Ireland. I also take the opportunity to wish you a very Merry Christmas and good time for all the festivities, the coming festivities. And I'm sure that the climate is adapted to have 1 or 2 glasses of good wines up there. So, tanti auguri di buon Natale, buone feste, as we say over here.
Great.
Thank you.
Buon Natale. Thanks, Giuseppe. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Happy Christmas.